Carrots and Cannibals by Philbrow, by the summer edition of The Vegan 2002. This is actually the article that Donald Watson referred to in his interview with George Rodger, where he said it wasn't very clear to read. I would agree with him, and I have edited this screenshot as best I can so that it is readable, and it's also why I'm narrating it. 10-year-old Alex regarded the proffered vegan sausage roll with incredulity and horror. "I'm not eating that." Eyes wide with shock. "I know what's in it." There might have been some excuse for this squeamish outburst, had it been the ghoulish concoction of pulverized bits of decaying flesh, bone, brain and gristle that went into your traditional pre-BSE sausage roll. Yet she would happily have eaten one of those grisly offerings, but an inoffensive snack composed of grains, vegetables and a few spices met with utter disgust. Why are we so irrational about food choices? Food is such a basic need that we need to be able to eat without too much thought, almost as we breathe or regulate our body temperature without being particularly aware of it. We put something in our mouths to eat about 25,000 times a year, and we cannot waste energy considering every mouthful. So the eating habits we learn are likely to remain with us as a simple survival mechanism and are very difficult to change. Just as a baby can be brought up to speak any one or more of the world's thousands of languages, so it can be taught any cultural food vocabulary. An Inuit toddler might happily chew on a bit of whale blubber. A Chinese aristocrat would have been delighted with a piece of roast dog. A Roman would eat dormice as a treat. Here we have such delicacies as overfatted goose liver produced by force feeding. Our moral decisions are based on a combination of factors, including reasoning, but also social and aesthetic factors, and the latter may be more important than we like to think. The case for the abolition of slavery or extending voting rights to women may seem obvious to us today, but early reformers had a hard time trying to get others to accept such bizarre ideas. They were simply not seen as moral issues. An example of aesthetics influencing us is that I would not feel inclined to eat roadkill or my late grandmother. Unlike my usual reasons for not eating fish, I claim no moral reason for this. It is a matter of the cultural norm. Had I been raised in a different society, I would doubtless have no problem with, say, cannibalism, assuming the victim died of natural causes. Why is Hannibal such a box office draw when it breaches one of modern society's greatest taboos? The morbid fascination that can be relied on to bring in the crowds is testimony to the strength of our own entrenched cultural habits. We imagine that only the most depraved monster could consider eating other people. There are good reasons for conservative eating habits, since the familiar can usually be assumed to be safe, but it can also work against us. There are thousands of species of potentially edible plants that we can thrive on, but only a handful are regarded as food. In the Nepalese famine of 1770, people starved rather than eat potatoes, and in 1943, when rice crops failed in Bengal, 3 million people died. Yet they rejected wheat offered as food. Studies have shown that tasting a strange food just once, even if it is disliked the first time, makes it much easier to accept as food when offered again. So if you can get your carnivorous friend to take even a bite of your tofu burger, you're halfway there. The army is well aware of the importance of adaptability in survival conditions. In 1985, a television documentary showed Royal Marines trainees having to make and eat an omelette of fried earthworms. Such as our fear of strange eating habits, neophobia, that his undertaking was considered by many as braver than genuinely life-threatening challenges, such as climbing sheer cliffs. As for the ultimate no-no, cannibalism survivors of a plane crash in 1972 were forced to eat their already dead companions. Common sense survival may have told them one thing, but it took 10 days to overcome their physical revulsion, enabling 16 of them to survive for a further 62 days before rescue. Cannibalism is, of course, as a matter of attitude rather than morals, assuming that people are not being specifically bred or killed for food. As psychologist Gerald Bennett says in his book, eating matters. In some societies, enemies are eaten, but in others, people eat their dead relatives and friends as a gesture of friendship. He quotes South American Indian as saying, "It is better to be inside a friend than to be swallowed up by the cold earth." Many readers will be familiar with the accusation that they are in some way depriving their child by not offering them meat. This is a typical example of habit superseding logic. Do we accuse omnivores of depriving their families of many varied vegan foods available, or of failing to provide a wider range of animals for them to eat? What, you mean you've never let your child try a dead rat or fried hedgehog? Most omnivores don't feel deprived as a result of their culturally restricted diet. As a vegan myself, I'm not advocating bring back cannibalism campaign, though there are doubtless arguments in its favour, such as efficient use of resources. What I am saying is that in our efforts to improve conditions for animals, we are up against something far stronger than the spurious reasoning offered by our non-vegan friends. The obstacle is not a lack of intelligence, compassion or sensitivity, but that most banal yet deadliest of enemies, habit. So after reading that article, I can definitely understand why Donald would praise it and recommend it in the way that he did, and I definitely also understand his criticism of the way that it was styled and coloured and pretty difficult to read. My personal criticism, however, would just be in that very last section, to just say, we're not here to improve the treatment of animals. I mean, obviously that is what we want, but long term, we're here to abolish the fact that they're used at all, anywhere, and that should be the message that potentially the vegan society are promoting.